Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined this morning by Andrew Erickson and by Chris Welsh. Welsh, it is week 3, week 2 for us. We didn't do week 1 because this is really a trade show and there was nothing to talk about yet. We had, kind of overreaction week last week, panic week last week. Now that we have another slate of games, are you feeling any differently about some of your overreactions from week 1?
Yeah, the 49ers are not a good team. They're frauds. And Christian McCaffrey was a bad take, which I'm going to obviously talk about. There were other takes too, but I'm just absolutely destroyed by all of that. Yeah, Marvin Harrison. We talked about Marvin Harrison Jr., by the way. This is kind of an inverse of what you just asked, but, everybody was panicking. And there's a little bit of questioning that goes along with buying and selling here. There's a very duality of being completely wrong, completely right. Everything is messed up after week 1 and it looks disastrous. It didn't in this case. We said, hey, you should buy on Marvin Harrison. What you just saw is not going to happen. That ended up working out. I think that was a nice, good answer to overreactions. But I will still say we are still in the vicinity of overreaction territory. It's not just week 1. Week 2 to week 3, this is prime overreaction territory where hopefully we don't make the wrong choices, but we can help everybody else take advantage of the people that are freaking out.
Erickson, do you feel like you have a better sense of what's real and what's not now that we have a second week of data to look at? Or are you kind of also thinking it's still overreaction, month, really, especially with the fact that these guys don't play in preseason anymore, that this essentially is their preseason, the first couple weeks of the season. So even aside from what the teams want to be doing and what we can learn lessons from that, it's what are they capable of doing right now? What can they actually execute? So how do you feel about all that?
I do feel a little bit better about certain players that performed the same in back-to-back weeks to open the year versus the guys that maybe were bad in week 1 and then good in week 2. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, well, was week 1 just the mirage and week 2 is what we're going to get? Or is week 2 the mirage and week 1 is really what we're going to get? Or is it going to be this ping pong? They're going back and forth and there's never really any consistency with certain players. So I think that there's an opportunity to potentially buy low on the guys that have struggled for 2 weeks, but there are some players that I think that they're struggling for the first 2 weeks because they're not in a good spot. They are potentially in trouble and it's maybe sounding alarms on these players and maybe they aren't what we expect them to be. And I think that going into viewing your team, especially with injuries, right? We've been seeing so many injuries. And again, you obviously are going to benefit if you trade away a player, then they end up getting hurt, but that's not obviously the strategy behind it. No one knows who's going to get hurt on a week-to-week basis. The injuries, it can be pretty random. So obviously you feel good if you trade away someone that gets hurt, but that's something you also could have acquired someone that got hurt the week that you played them, even if they were a sharp buy low player. So those are some things to keep in mind.
Let's jump into the trade show. We're going to talk some players to buy, some players to sell. They can be buy highs, they can be buy lows, they can be sell highs, they can be sell lows. So we're kind of all encompassing here, but just players to buy, players to sell. We'll hit on some running backs, hit on some wide receivers. Quick reminder for everybody, fantasypros.com/rankings. You can find all of our rankings, week 3 rankings, rest of season rankings, our individual, Fantasy Pros expert rankings. We're all on there. So you can definitely find all the rankings that you could possibly want for any format, fantasypros.com/rankings. Let's start off the show as we always do with some just high level, overarching, macro level trade strategy advice from Erickson. Erickson, what do you have for us this week?
All right. So I have a couple different points today. And if you want to get the full in-depth, especially when it comes to buying high, selling low, which is a little bit more of an in-depth conversation, go check out the Fantasy Football Week 3 forecast. It's my big article weekly for Fantasy Pros that kind of recaps last week's action and kind of forecasts what we're going to see in week 3. So go check that out for a larger in-depth look at buying high and selling low. But overall this week, some of the main points I want to hit on. If a player's performance is too good to be true, it probably is. Over the first 2 weeks, it probably is, especially with players that if they've been in the league for a while, we've seen them, and this seems like a very outlier 2-week performance, then it's probably too good to be true. And the same thing with players that have underperformed. If we've seen a player be very productive, again, here's an example, Amari Cooper, right? He has over 270 air yards. He has 27 receiving yards. Okay. We've talked about Amari Cooper a lot on this show and talked about how he's always been a top 24 wide receiver every single year. He finds a way to get it done. And we know that it's a rocky road for him. So based on the usage he's getting, based on the targets, based on the air yards, he's not going to be whatever receiver he is right now, which is probably outside the top 80. And the same thing with Jerry Jeudy. being the more productive receiver in that Browns offense. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. Backing to buying low and selling high. I think it should feel kind of gross when you're sending out these types of offers. Last week, I felt gross talking about Cooper Kupp. It didn't feel good, but it ended up being the right play because that type of target usage was not sustainable, especially given the Rams and all the injuries they had on their offensive line. And yes, it felt gross, but ultimately that made it being the good play, selling off of Cooper Kupp. So again, I think that when you're trying to buy low and sell high, it should feel gross to some extent. The player's coming off a monster game, a ton of targets. Everyone saw it on prime time. Yes, you're feeling great about it at the time, but if you can sell it for a king's ransom, I think that's the move to make. The other thing I want to talk about is when I get this question a lot when people are asking me about who should I trade away? Well, don't focus so much on who should you trade away, who is the worst asset that you can move away from. Think about, well, what are you acquiring? That's what I think you should focus more on. Less about what you're giving away and more about what you're acquiring. So when anyone ever asks me, hey, who should I trade away? I always respond with, well, who can you get the most for back in return? Think about more about what you're getting back and less about what you're giving away. So those are some of the things that I've been kind of thinking about as I'm looking at this week 3 slate, how I want to approach some of my teams, especially when it comes to teams if you're 0-2 or you've been hit by the injury bug because there's been a ton of injuries already. So if you're one of those teams, especially if you're 0-2 and you have injuries, if it's a double whammy, then you got to make some moves right now or your season's going to be up in smoke real quick.
To that point, it's very difficult when people, and I love when people reach out and just ask for our opinions on stuff because it's cool to engage with the fans and to know that people, really value what you have to say, Erickson, or what I have to think, or what anybody here at Fantasy Pros, has an opinion on. Having said that, it's very difficult with very generic trade questions because it is so league dependent. Now, if you say, hey, should I trade this player for this player? I have this offer. That's a lot easier. But when you say, who can I go trade this guy for? It depends on your league. Some leagues are very heavy on trading. Some leagues aren't. Some leagues have the one guy who's willing to react aggressively early in the season. Some leagues don't have that guy. It just totally depends. To your point, go for the bigger name. See, hey, maybe the guy in your league is willing to move off so-and-so, really good player who's had a bad first 2 weeks. And just because we think, well, nobody would consider that because we definitely think you should hold that guy, doesn't mean everybody in your league disagrees. So I say all that to say, just because it's very difficult for us to give very generic trade advice in terms of, hey, you can go out and get X for this player Y, make the offer. And if it's somebody that we generally like or generally dislike, try and take advantage of that. Welsh, what do you think about that advice?
Yeah, I like everything that you guys both just said. Specifically, Erickson, when you were talking about the idea where people get hyper focused on their player that they might be moving away and not focusing enough on what they're acquiring, there is this very big, and we are kind of doing it in this regard as far as how we're buying and we're selling players. But I think this is a very tenuous time of the season where it's I don't look at players and I'm like, get him out of there. Even though I'm telling you, last week, we're telling you, sell this guy, get him out while you can. No, it's really not. It's about optimizing value to better your team. Maybe you can forecast that how their performance is going to lower a tiny bit and you can kind of move off of it. But I just I don't work in absolutes, especially in the first 3-4 weeks of the season. So it's very fluid and, you guys can all just kind of slowly work through, take the advice. But I really, really specifically like the idea of focusing on your team build than more than just absolutely uprooting and being well, we know this guy is going to fail, because I'm going to talk about guys on here that I'm selling today that I'm not adamant, you have to get out, but there are selling opportunities where it feels like a guy is overperforming, but you have to play in the possibility that changes have happened. So this is a unique show because it's just a fluid situation of only so much time in the season we've had when we're making some pretty big decisions. You're best focusing on your construction and your team than absolutely upending everything that you've done.
Erickson, what do you think, and this is the last question before we get some players, what do you think is the point in the season where you're willing to maybe start making desperation moves? Obviously 0-2 is something you can very easily overcome. At what point, if you get to 0-3 starts to look pretty bad, 0-4, 1-5, at what point are you saying okay, it doesn't even really matter if I still believe in these players, you have to make a move just to stay afloat and keep yourself alive for the playoffs? Is there a point in the early season where you reach that?
I think that 0-3 is probably a good point. The bye weeks start in week 5. So then you're already running into more potential issues where if you're already down a bunch of players because of injuries, because of underperformers, well, you need to get ahead of that now, especially looking ahead. So be considerate of week 5 bye weeks. Do you have players on week 5 bye weeks? Are you 0-2? Look, you can be a little bit more aggressive with some of these trades, especially going after some of these buy low players. Maybe you need to buy low on multiple players. Again, they all don't need to hit, but only maybe one of them really needs to turn their production around to really give you that extra advantage as you look to turn around your season. So again, you still have the waiver wire. Again, make sure you're checking out that type of analysis over on the site as well, because that's part of the trade. Again, people look at waiver wire pieces as not tradable essentially because, I got them for free. Well, no, you didn't. You had to invest either a priority or fab dollars to get those certain types of players. So I know that a lot of waiver wire players are not really great trade assets, but I think that makes them almost undervalued in trades because, I got this guy for free. Well, just because he was free doesn't mean he doesn't have actual value, especially if he's scoring fantasy points, which up to this point, your roster may be lacking. So I would say to take advantage of that as well. But I think that, honestly, right now, I honestly don't think it's too early to start trying to really have an honest conversation, look in the mirror and be like, hey, look at this roster right now. Hey, do I need to make a move or should I just wait it out? And depending on injuries specifically, I think that you should be making moves.
And when you look in the mirror, if it's like that Sydney Sweeney meme where he's just like crying and trying to smile, maybe you need to make a move. Maybe you need to.
TD, Tutty, taking it to the house, in for 6. Whatever you call a touchdown, one thing's for sure. Touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. On the ground, in the air, from the special teams or defense, we don't care how they score them. We just want to bet on touchdowns. And DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first NFL bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score a touchdown. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your bet today. One super fun matchup in week 3 is Lions-Cardinals. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned Arizona in every one of these reads this season, and that's not stopping in week 3. I can't wait to watch this one. The total is the highest of any matchup this week at 51. Lions are field goal favorites on the road. This one is going to be tons of fun. It should feature tons of touchdowns. Lines and odds subject to change, of course, but I am expecting touchdowns galore in this game. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $250 in bonus bets instantly and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, guys, let's get into our players to buy. Welsh, who is your running back?
All right, I have a weird one for you guys because this is a guy that in theory could have his job taken away later this year. And I suppose there's a homer because there's 49ers around me. I am buying Jordan Mason. And this is an interesting idea. And I'll be very curious where Erickson's at on this because this is a massive question we've been seeing in Discord across the board where Jordan Mason owners have been trying to unload him. That has been the primary move for Jordan Mason. Owners, move him. No one can get really any value. I'm here to say, I think maybe we need to turn that and we need to start being the buyers, especially at the cost. So clearly, Jordan Mason has been great this year. He's second in the league in rushing yards, 247, second in the league in rush attempt percentage, while leading in rush attempts. And he has the most yards for running backs after contact. But one of the big points about this is just centered around Christian McCaffrey. And here's the thing that I want to lay out. He has a huge warning sign on himself, not McCaffrey. He does. It's a big injury sign. But Jordan Mason is this big warning sign of, hey, Christian McCaffrey is going to come back. So that's why people have been trying to flip Mason for McCaffrey or Devin Singletary. Like, no one can really figure out the value. But here are some likely scenarios that we are going to be stepping into in the coming weeks, knowing, by the way, we know we've got Jordan Mason for at least 3 more weeks at minimum. Here are the scenarios. Real chance the injury holds out Christian McCaffrey for longer. There is a real chance that this injury lingers into the season, and the injury doesn't need to happen for this to happen, but Jordan Mason continues to have value on this team, the highest run-heavy offense in the NFL that wants to run it 30-plus times. There's a real chance, even when McCaffrey's back, he's getting 15 carries. Here's the other one. There's a real chance Christian McCaffrey doesn't come back this season. There is no positive conversation around this injury with him right now. And I think everybody is leaving on the table the possibility of being able to acquire a top 8 back in the NFL, even if it was for 8 weeks at this point, for fractions of the cost. He is one of the most efficient fantasy running backs in the NFL right now, with a huge warning sign. With the 49ers, they're going to be playing for the playoffs. They're kind of like the Lakers. Let these guys sit, worry about it when we get time for the playoff. This is a bad injury. My point is to go out and look at the Jordan Mason owner. Those people are still trying to unload him. And like Erickson said before, focus not so much on what you have to give away to win that trade. Focus on what makes sense, that makes your team better. And you come to terms with what Jordan Mason can do for this team, whether it is 3 weeks, 5 weeks, 10 weeks, or the entire season. I still think the cost for him, his efficiency, and what he means for this offense, that is now without Debo for a couple of weeks, which would be another one of those running backs. Jordan Mason, I think, can be had at a reasonable cost to the risk of McCaffrey coming back, with also the possibility McCaffrey doesn't come back. So I want to buy Jordan Mason.
I think we might be gearing up for a season with Jordan Mason that people point to for the next half decade as this is why I want to handcuff people, is because of how well it worked out with Jordan Mason. If you were the CMC owner that happened to get him, and it really saved your bacon this season. It reminds me a lot of, it's for a different reason that this player is missing time. But when Le'Veon Bell sat out the season, and if you just took James Conner, like with your last round pick, all of a sudden you had this RB1 that you got for free, and it lasted the whole season. And it was, when is this going to end? When is this going to end? And it just kept going. And he was a league winner. He certainly was for me. So I could see that playing out with Jordan Mason. I think you're spot on, Welsh, that like, what incentive is there to rush him back? None. The Niners are going to make the playoffs with or without Christian McCaffrey. I know that it was a struggle this particular week, but in general, I expect them to be just fine without McCaffrey, especially if Mason keeps playing well. So you're right. They are playing. They're not even playing for the playoffs. They're playing for February. This is a team. All they care about is the Super Bowl. So why would you risk Christian McCaffrey?
And also, my biggest point too is if you go and look at, let's just top 15 running backs in fantasy right now over the 2 weeks. It's kind of messy. All the positions are met. You go look at quarterback, by the way, rankings over the first 2 weeks. It's like Baker Mayfield and Derek Carr and like Daniel Jones scored the second or the fifth most in week 2. Sam Darnold. It's crazy. So it's crazy. But my main point is you go look at like the top 15 running backs in fantasy right now. I can guarantee you Jordan Mason is the most acquirable of all of them. And we know what the reason is. But maybe we are underplaying how important that reason actually is. And Jordan Mason's value to what you'd have to give up, you don't have to give up a top 12 running back to get him who could be that top 12 running back. We know you don't. It's tough. And I think the Jordan Mason owners have a difficult time valuing it. And Dynasty, it makes it a little bit easier. But I'm out acquiring and trying to be aggressive. Erickson, are you co-signing this at all?
Oh, 100%. 100% co-signing. I think that, look, I was fading McCaffrey in draft season. And it's like, why stop now, right? Why not just go full fade on McCaffrey? And like you said, what if he doesn't come back at all? What if they see him in the playoffs? I mean, Marquise Brown is a player that's injured, and the Chiefs are like, well, we're going to bring him back in the postseason. That's when we're going to need him the most. And I think that you have a almost correlation here where the better Jordan Mason plays, the more fantasy points he scores, the less likely the 49ers are going to rush back Christian McCaffrey.
Absolutely.
So you have to almost make a decision in your mind, but like, I'm going to fade McCaffrey. I don't think he's going to come back. And just make that decision in your mind. And then where do you value Jordan Mason in your mind? Oh, he's a top 10 running back for the rest of the season. But no one else is, because everyone else is kind of hedging their bets a little bit, right? With his value. And that's why he is able to be bought. Especially if you're 0-2 and you need running back, here you go. And then you figure out the rest later, but you need to stack up wins right now. And I think that the best approach would be to go to a manager that has Jordan Mason, that maybe has an abundance of depth already. Jordan Mason was a late round pick. This manager may already have a bunch of running backs, and they feel like, oh, like I can trade off Jordan Mason. I don't need him. And McCaffrey might come back. So then I want to trade him while he still has value. So I think you can get a good deal going in that matter. I think it's a little bit tougher if the Jordan Mason manager also has McCaffrey. I think that'd be less likely. So I would not try to make that type of deal. And unfortunately, again, if that's the situation in your league, you might be out of luck trying to get Jordan Mason. But in leagues where the Jordan Mason manager isn't the McCaffrey manager, then I think that this is a deal to make. And if you're the McCaffrey manager and you don't have Jordan Mason, you got to get him on your team. like that's the other thing to look at too. And unfortunately, you might be in a bind because that other manager may be charging a premium because they know you have McCaffrey and you're a little bit more desperate.
He's currently RB18 in our consensus rest of season rankings. He's RB17 in our just Fantasy Pros expert rest of season rankings. That feels fair, but I mean, it definitely is not. Like I think to that point, if you are trading for him, you're maybe giving away a little bit of floor, but you don't have to give away the similar ceiling that you're going to get back with him. Like you're adding value in terms of your upside rest of season, and floor doesn't really exist because anybody can get hurt anytime. So I'm always going to be playing for that upside side of things. So yeah, I really like this call. I think that he's a player worth buying, not at literally any price, but at most price that I think is that you can get him. I think he's very good as a value there. Erickson, who's your running back?
Yeah, so this one feels gross, which is why it's the perfect player to buy. I'm going with our running back, DeAndre Swift for the Chicago Bears. Was not high on DeAndre Swift entering draft season because I thought he was going to be in a committee, and I wasn't sure exactly how this Bears offense would shake out with Shane Waldron, Caleb Williams, a lot of question marks. But through 2 weeks, it's been underwhelming with Swift. He's not seeing the short yardage types of carries. Khalil Herbert is the player that did get the red zone touchdown for the Bears against the Houston Texans. But this one is more about price. Everyone is kind of low on the Bears right now. Low on the Bears offense. Caleb Williams, he's running like a chicken with his head cut off in the backfield. He's not going through the reads. He's just trying to make backyard plays. The matchups have been tough, honestly, with the first 2 weeks. The Titans, very underrated defense, and the Texans, again, another really good defense. This week, or the next 3 weeks, the Bears are facing the Colts, the Rams, and the Panthers. 3 of the worst run defenses we've seen over the first 2 weeks of the NFL season. So whereas Swift, the player, I'm not super high on, I'm looking for, hey, what kind of running back can put up solid production over the next month or so, and then maybe I can sell high on a little bit later in the year because I'm not a believer in Swift long-term. So I think DeAndre Swift, again, the Bears right now, everyone's super low on them, but the thing with his role in this offense, he's the lead back. They're not playing anybody else. They played Herbert at the red zone, but he only played 9% of the snaps in week 2. DeAndre Swift was at 66%. He also was targeted 5 times, caught 4 passes for 14 yards. So again, I'm looking at matchups here with the Chicago Bears. I like them, and I think that Swift can be productive over this stretch as a buy low running back with the Chicago Bears and the offense, not very popular right now. So I think that he's a player that I would try to buy low on.
This one does feel gross. Welsh, what do you think?
Yeah, it's pretty gross, but it's the type of move that really is low impact if you're wrong at this point of the season. And I think that's kind of the way sometimes I want to focus. Obviously, like you want to hit like a big home run in trades, and there's some people that just get super antsy and go crazy with it. But if you want to dip your toe into the trade market while not having or giving away big, massive assets, actually, think this one is kind of sneaky because the Bears offense, what it is right now, I mean, there's 2 ways it's going to go. If this Bears offense looks like it did the first 2 weeks, 4 weeks from now, people are going to be losing their minds, and it's going to be Bryce Young equals Caleb Williams conversation all over the place. I don't think that's going to happen. There's too many good weapons. A lot of conversation. If you watch Caleb Williams, he needs to get the ball out quicker. Get it out quick. Just easy. Maybe simplify some of these reads into not letting him check down. Go to your first read, go to your second. But also, if you are getting the ball out quicker and they say, we want you to focus on your first read, and your first read's not open, what's going to end up happening? Tight ends and running backs. You're going to start having lower impact throws, and that benefits DeAndre Swift. We've still seen some good Swiftiness from him in general. I like this one. I think there's like little downside with a pretty decent amount of upside because that cost, what was he in draft season? Like 30, 26, between 26 and 30. He's probably barely a flex option in a lot of people's minds right now. You could probably unload a 4th wide receiver to go and get a guy like Swift because I don't think people are in any positive run. I will tell you, Khalil Herbert bothers me a little bit. He was getting that inside the 5 carry. If they use him and utilize him in that way, that's not fantastic long-term, but PPR, DeAndre Swift is going to catch some more balls out of the backfield and is going to get some more open space when they start being able to move the ball, and DJ Moore is not asking for Tyler Bagent to become the quarterback on the sidelines. When they can actually spread the field, that is going to benefit DeAndre Swift. So we haven't seen the offense that will benefit Swift in the first 2 weeks. So yeah, it's a good buy.
I will say too, Herbert, I mean, he's available on waiver wires, right? People are just cutting him and dropping him. So you can get both Bears running backs, I think, on your team and kind of see how this plays out, whether Swift holds onto the job or maybe they get Khalil Herbert a little bit more involved. Again, it's a matchup play for me, right? That's what I'm hoping works out by buying the Bears running backs. Because there's nothing the last 2 weeks that have suggested, the Bears, great running the football team. That's not the case. It's the Colts, the Rams, the Panthers. 3 teams that have been truck sticked by running backs over the past 3 weeks.
It's time for this week's player we would trade almost anything for, brought to you by Uber Eats. This week, that player is Terry McLaurin. Welsh, why are you trading almost anything for McLaurin?
Terry McLaurin has underperformed early in the year, but he was the hotness in draft season. So why are we giving up on him now? Some reasons to like Terry McLaurin still. 22% target share, ranks 14th in air yard share at over 43%. Still a 27% first read share, which is top 30% in the league. By the way, for his first read share percentage, that is higher than Mike Evans or Jamar Chase. Currently has a 33% design play rate going towards him. And that is among the top 2 wide receivers in the league. That's the second best. So if you take the 2 top wide receivers, fantasy points data shows an almost double expected fantasy points per game based on his underlying metrics. And a reason I really like Terry McLaurin right now, Jayden Daniels throws to his first read 75% of the time, which is 8th most in the NFL. And he has the 8th best adjusted completion percentage in the league. He is learning to become a better passer. It hasn't fully hit yet. And Terry McLaurin is going to break good very, very soon.
So there you have it. Welsh would trade almost anything for Terry McLaurin. That was this week's Uber Eats Player of the Week. Get almost anything for Game Day delivered with Uber Eats, the official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Erickson, what do you think about Terry McLaurin? Is he also somebody that you're looking to buy, or are you more concerned by these first 2 weeks?
So I'm concerned because I don't know if we're going to get the ceiling that we hoped it would happen with Jayden Daniels. That's my concern. Again, the hope was, hey, Terry McLaurin's playing with the best quarterback of his NFL career, Jayden Daniels, rookie quarterback, 2 weeks in. That has not been the case, especially how they've been using McLaurin in this offense and how they're just not attacking downfield. Like Jayden Daniels at LSU, that's all he did was chuck it deep. But now with Cliff Kingsbury in this horizontal raid, it's let's get the running backs in the passing game. Let's get the tight ends involved in the passing game with this short to intermediate passing game. And then you have Jayden Daniels also running a ton. So for me, yes, McLaurin, where he is at right now, he's going to improve. There's no doubt in my mind, because what we've seen from him historically is, hey, he's a locked and loaded wide receiver too, every single year. So I think when we look up at the end of the season, that's where he's going to be. But that being said, do I need to go head over heels to acquire a wide receiver too? That's, hey, he's going to have spike weeks. It'll be production. I guess for me, 2 weeks in this offense, I'm not seeing the needle moving ceiling that I was hoping going into draft season with McLaurin attached to Daniels. So that's my only concern of, I think that he is a buy low target, because I think the production is going to come, especially in the next couple of weeks. But when it's all said and done, he's wide receiver 24 at the end of the year, and I traded for him. Again, if I can get good value on that, great. Then I feel good about it. But I'm not necessarily going super aggressive trying to get McLaurin on my roster attached to, again, he's attached to a rookie quarterback. And traditionally, unless you're CJ Stroud, you usually don't get massive ceilings from receivers attached to rookie passers.
And one thing you'd love to see too is you'd love to see McLaurin get in the slot a little bit. He's like 83% out wide, but
it's very special.
Oh yeah, well, I would love to see that. I'm saying, but like, one of the things I would push with in this scenario, you're right about the rookie quarterback, but it's as the offense starts to establish who they are, and I don't think we've seen that. We saw this other version in week 1. We are seeing Brian Robinson look fantastic, and he looks like a buy right now. If you have a league mates that don't believe that Brian Robinson is like a top 15 to 18 back and you can get him for cheaper, it's a good buy. But as they are able to establish, and this is what happens with that, some of those lower intermediate passes and that run game, it opens up those bigger plays. I'm really encouraged 8th best adjusted completion percentage from Jaden Daniels at this stage. They want him to throw more because they trust him to throw more. They know the legs are there for the backup, but they want him to throw more. And the guy that is going to get it done for them is Terry McLaurin in the long term. And I guess it's just like, you're right. You're not wrong. He might end up being like wide receiver 24, but what's the cost right now? People frustrated with Terry McLaurin. Everybody, we all sold it. Terry McLaurin in a big breakout. That feeling when you prop a player up like that, that's wide receiver 28 in draft season, and is not even doing that, people want him off their team. They don't want him even as a top 3 wide receiver. So you might be in a situation where you can buy him under a top 36 wideout right now because they don't feel this team is going to be able to throw. And that's what makes it so interesting to buy, because there are underlying things that really support. I don't even know if I properly said it, but double fantasy points, double the expected fantasy points than his current fantasy point output is a positive. There's a lot of underlying things in the offense. That's why I think even if someone was like, well, mid-30s running back, I still think Bogman's favorite saying there's meat on the bone for Terry McLaurin into the future. I think he's kind of it's not quite swift like you, but I think it's kind of a low impact buy right now.
This is, if you believe in him, this is the time to get him, because his managers are maybe not panicking, but they are concerned based on the usage. So, and Erickson, you talk about this a lot, like with receivers, because it's an inherently volatile up and down roller coaster position. Like, coming off of a couple of down weeks in a row is the time to get a receiver if you do really believe in them. The other thing for me is, like, I'm not really worried about the fact that it's a rookie quarterback, because even like a rookie quarterback, it's Jaden Daniels. He's better than the quarterbacks McLaurin has had in Washington. So, like, even if, yes, historically rookie quarterbacks can somewhat cap the ceiling of players, we have seen what the floor with McLaurin can be with really poor quarterback play in the past. So for me, it's more about, are we going to get the usage you want to see? You mentioned the Cliff Kingsbury special. It has not been great in terms of just where they're lining him up so far. I mean, he had twice as many targets as anybody else on the team, and he still finished with 22 yards this week. I mean, the usage is just abysmal, but I love the player. I do think it's a quarterback upgrade still, even if he's a rookie who's going to take some time to figure things out. So assuming you can get him low, I'm not going to buy high on Terry McLaurin, obviously.
No, there's nothing to buy high. There is no high right now.
Exactly. Yeah. But if you even get a discount, I am very willing to do that after just 2 weeks. Erickson, you have a player that maybe is not a buy high, but is probably going to cost a bit more here for your wide receiver to buy.
Jamar Chase, my wide receiver 1 entering the season, and he has been poop for the first 2 weeks of the year, because this is what the Bengals always do. They just don't show up. Zach Taylor, 6 seasons as the head coach of the Bengals. They've been 0-2 in 5 of those 6 seasons, even though they almost came close to beating the Chiefs, the upset special of the week. Harrison Butker had other plans. But looking at last year, Chase did this exact same thing. He was horrible for the first 2 weeks of the season. And then he just went off until Joe Burrow got hurt. So it's rinse and repeat, folks. Again, it's hard to get players of Chase's caliber in trades because they get drafted really high. But with the contract and the vibes around the Bengals, I think there's a buying opportunity. It's not, hey, I have the best player in fantasy, I'm not going to accept any trade, because that's what usually happens with these types of top tier players is, no, I'm not going to, like McCaffrey last year, right? If you had him on your roster, you were just going to ignore every trade. Even if it made sense, you were just going to ignore the trades because you had the best player in fantasy. I still think Chase has that type of ceiling as Joe Burrow's number 1 target. I don't know when we're going to see T. Higgins return to this lineup with his hamstring injury continuing to linger. And they're playing the Washington Commanders, guys, in week 3. Jamar Chase may score. He's going to make up for all the points that he hasn't scored the last 2 weeks in week 3. I feel pretty confident about that. I mean, Malik Neighbors, a rookie, had a monster game. Daniel Jones had a startable game against this secondary.
You were about to say an outlandish number. Say the number that came to your head. You look like you were going to say 200 yards and 15 catches. Say that number.
I mean, we can see 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. There's no one on this defense that's going to be able to stop Jamar Chase. And how do they build momentum? Chase and Burrow, again, kind of been out of sync because Chase has missed so much time at training camp, but now it's 2 weeks in. Now it's 3rd week back, full at practice. I think that it's going to be Chase, and he's just going to be running wild against his Commanders defense. And then there's going to be no buy low window anymore after this week. So again, the one positive about last week, despite the Bengals losing and Chase kind of having a subpar performance, again, going back to the Chiefs, what do? Take away your number 1 weapon. So that's why he only had cut 4 or 5 targets, 14% target share for 35 yards. Again, the Chiefs forced you to look elsewhere. Trent Irwin had 6 red zone targets. Trenton Irwin. That's never going to happen ever again. So those red zone targets are going to go to Jamar Chase in week 3. Not Yoshivis, not Irwin. It's going to be Chase. So I'm expecting multi-touchdowns, definitely over 100 receiving yards, 10 receptions. Yes, this is the time to buy low on Jamar Chase.
It's a great point. Like, I do think this is the pass defense to target all season long in Washington. And when you have a guy of Chase's talent, now he's gotten a couple of weeks to kind of shake off the rust of his holdout throughout August. Like, it does certainly feel like an explosion week is coming. Welsh, who are the types of names that you would be willing to give away to get a guy like Chase? I mean, are you trading a fellow first rounder who is maybe a back half of the first round guy that you do just like Chase better? Are you trying to aim a little lower than that? What's your approach if you're trying to acquire Chase?
Well, I'm definitely trying to aim lower. That should always be your thing. But Erickson hit exactly the main point here is there are players that you can't even have a conversation with. And then there are times where the buy low is just because now they'll listen. It doesn't mean you're going to get a discount. But let me present this one to you because, again, I would want to be shooting low. I'd be wanting to go and trade, in the 10 range, a Davante Adams. I don't know, anything in that territory, which is not going to get it done, unfortunately. Let me ask you this one, though. Jamar Chase or Tyreek Hill rest of season now that we've got Skylar Thompson at quarterback for God knows how long. Who are you going to bank on rest of season? This is kind of easy for Erickson because he had Jamar Chase at number 1 before, and now the quarterback plays there. But Worm, what about you?
I would prefer Chase. I had Tyreek and Chase in the same tier during draft season, but I actually did have Chase one spot ahead of Tyreek. Erickson convinced me doing too many shows with him over the summer. And now with the quarterback difference, and I was a little worried about Burrow with the wrist injury stuff, but obviously less concerned there than, in the Dolphins quarterback room right now. So for me, I would actually happily trade Tyreek for Chase, and I wouldn't even think twice about it, honestly.
That's probably the realm. The only thing, my only little slight argument to Tyreek Hill is there are some wide receivers that have proven to be quarterback proof. Justin Jefferson was quarterback proof. I don't think it's outlandish to say that Tyreek Hill can be quarterback-ish proof. So there was the most panic this week in the Discord on Monday was 100% Tyreek Hill. People were scared and people want to move off of it. And that would be a probably good conversation and buy. But I think the only real conversation of a wide receiver you can have if you were trading wide receiver for wide receiver in that first round is probably a Tyreek Hill. Then I think you're in this situation where I just don't think 1-for-1s are going to work for a guy like Jamar Chase. It's probably going to have to be 2-for-1s, and it's going to push the boundaries of people's comfort because you're not going to be able to, everybody's going to want to do that stupid trade that you would screenshot and put on Twitter and be like, look at this idiot, and it'll just be like, would you take, Juwan Jennings and David Montgomery? Would that work? It'll be some dumb thing like that. You're going to have to push the limits of what you're really comfortable with. And it might have to be, a mid-tier running back or mid-tier wide receiver with a second tier of that other position. And I think it might be worth it because I'm with Erickson. Jamar Chase is going to go off this week on Out of Bounds, which we do on Discord, fantasypros.com/chat. I had him. We did this game, the 3-1-1, a 300-yard passer, 100-yard rusher, 100-yard receiver. I picked Jamar Chase without question. My touchdown call on that show, Jamar Chase. It's an easy bet. I fully stand that he is going to go off, and this is the buy opportunity. It's just where are you willing to sell? Unfortunately, also AJ Brown got hurt, Puka. A lot of the first round wide receivers got hurt. That hurts the equity of other players when you're trying to buy them, like a Jamar Chase. So I'd be aggressive. No, it's going to push your limits of comfort. But like Erickson said at the beginning of the show, just focus on your own team and focus on the acquisition. Don't put all the focus on what you're giving away.
Three. So you mentioned, or you talked about Tyreek Hill, right? So 3 running backs coming off monster games. James Cook, Devon Achane, Alvin Kamara. Do any of those guys get it done for Chase straight up?
Achane. I think Achane's the only one that anyone has any even second thought about because you're going to see a higher workload. That offense is going to have to probably rely on him a little bit more without Tua. I don't know he gets it done, but that's a great one because it's probably Achane plus Terry McLaurin or HN plus George Pickens for someone to make that move. And, are you comfortable doing that?
I wonder if Kamara might have a little more juice than you think.
Touched. That's why I'm looking at Kamara, and I think that's the perfect.
I don't think it does.
He looks good, and the offense looks so surprisingly legitimate that like I think everybody is talking about that Kamara was undervalued this draft season. Like that's like the primary conversation. I think that he gets closer to getting it done. Not closer than Achane. I think Achane is more likely, but I think he's closer to Achane than Cook in that scenario. But by the way, Welsh, I just have to say, like you said, like, you know, oh, Justin Jefferson, like turns out maybe he wasn't quarterback proof. I think there's a difference between being quarterback proof with former top 5 pick Sam Darnold and being quarterback proof with Skylar Thompson.
Well, no, but he did it last year with
I know
with Beathard. I know what you're saying, but
really bad,
for this year, but he proved last year when he lost Cousins, he did it with Beathard. Like that's quarterback proof. But yeah, this is Skylar Thompson. So
yeah. All right, let's get to some players to sell. Welsh, who is your running back?
All right, my sell, I'm actually going to stick with those Minnesota Vikings, and I am selling Aaron Jones. And I think this is going to be contrary to our boy Debro, who's, I think, touting kind of buying and being excited about him. Not going to lie, Aaron Jones definitely has some positives. My problem is twofold, and you kind of saw this in the 49er game. The injuries are starting to kind of pop up, getting knocked out of the game a little bit. Nothing serious, but I think there's a serious injury worry with Aaron Jones at all times. And the team pushing Ty Chandler more and more. Jones currently has an only 57% snap percentage and a 46% rush attempt percentage, only taking 46% of the rush attempts. Critical fumble and game changer for Ty Chandler getting those carries. I think he was up to 8 or either way. He has 18 carries through the first two games. Ty Chandler does. I think that's important. I do think this gives the possibility for Jones to potentially be kind of fresh and make some of those big plays where the 49ers used to implement this with Raheem Mostert back in the day is you split the carries between, you have a guy come in mid-series and he's fresh. That is solid. And I'm not saying that Aaron Jones is a slouch. There's some good underlying metrics as far as tackle breaking and explosive runs. He's more explosive right now than Ty Chandler, but opportunities might end up being capped. So you're not like selling because you have to get out from him. I think you're selling because there's positive narratives around the Vikings. There's positive narratives around him catching the ball. And I view this as he still has teens value of a running back that might end up capping around the mid-20s. So if I can utilize him to another position, I really don't know if I'm missing a whole lot. I believe currently, I don't have the night game, so this might have pushed down one. He was sitting around like RB 20 or 21 in half PPR. If I can sell him to someone that views they're getting their upgrade in the teens of a running back, I kind of want to move off of him. Injuries, cap, and how much Ty Chandler's being used. I'm not super into it. Again, not to say that I hate him and not that he can't be serviceable, but I would rather move that position into another spot. I mean, I know this might sound outlandish, but Brian Robinson Jr. was going dramatically after Aaron Jones. If I could swing Aaron Jones to go and get myself Brian Robinson, no brainer. I'll give him a little bit extra. I would do that move.
I actually had Robinson ahead of Jones in draft season. I was fading Jones. I felt bad about it after week 1, feel a little better after week 2. Erickson, what do you think about this call?
I like the call with Aaron Jones. I think that something that we have to remind ourselves with some of these underpriced running backs that were maybe drafted a little bit later, well, there were injury concerns with them. That's why they weren't going so high. But guys aren't going to get hurt necessarily through 2 weeks of play, right? And so Welsh brings up a good point where part of the reason why Jones was discounted during draft season wasn't about, well, he's going to get hurt in week 2. It's, well, he's not going to be available for the second half of the season because of his lack of 17-game availability the past couple of years. So I think that this is a sharp way to get on it. We saw kind of the downside a little bit last week. I know that he also, I believe he lost a fumble last week as well.
Right at the one.
Yep, right at the 1 yard line. So, hey, do we keep giving the ball to Aaron Jones near the goal line? Does he have ball security issues? Again, just other factors at play in here. The number one factor, I think, for me, the matchup this week. You can't run on the Houston Texans defense. You just can't do it. They showed last year. Again, this is not the Houston Texans of old where Derrick Henry was just putting up 200 rushing yards every single week against the Houston Texans. This is a brand new DeMeco Ryans. They are a no-joke run defense, and they've been the best run defense basically since DeMeco Ryans took over last season. So if you're going to get down game from him in Houston in week 3, then his value is going to be even that more suppressed heading into week 4. They have a week 6 bye week, I believe. So now you're looking at, okay, well, he's not going to be available for me in week 6. Then he faces the Lions, week 7, another tough run defense. So again, the Vikings have a tough schedule kind of coming up. So I could not agree more. Aaron Jones, I think Aaron Jones for Brian Robinson makes a ton of sense. Welsh, do you do Aaron Jones for Jordan Mason? That's the question I wanted to bring up to you.
Absolutely. In a heartbeat. That's the type of stuff I'm talking about. I how
agree.
aggressive I would be with Jordan Mason right now. Like clear, you don't want to give up like Achane for Jordan Mason or anything like that. But like Aaron Jones is I actually didn't even set this up, but you nailed this. This is the perfect type of scenario of the high of the player that you would want to try to potentially trade. I think you could also trade like this might hurt people like Dave Montgomery's. Like I think that could be in the line of Jordan Mason's, but this one, this is perfect. And I think that owner would be like, ooh, look at me. I'm getting the rest of the season back. Jordan Mason might outplay Aaron Jones as a starter this year. The injuries, the carries to Ty Chandler, I think it's something to think about. And I think that's a sharp move right there of Aaron Jones for Jordan Mason.
Erickson, who's your running back that you're selling?
I'm going to sell Zack Moss because I think that he's going down the path that we saw with Alexander Madison last year, right? 2 weeks in last year, Alexander Madison was underwhelming, wasn't really putting up fantasy points. And yet he still had a stranglehold on that RB1 job. There was no concern about, again, the aforementioned Ty Chandler really eating into his workload. And that's what's happening here so far with the Bengals backfield. Zack Moss leads the backfield, 12 carries, 34 yards, under 3 yards per carry, but he played 80% of the snaps. So they're really not giving that much credence to using Chase Brown in this offense. But what do we know about teams and offenses, especially ones that are 0-2? You look to change things up, right? Have the Bengals offense, has their run game been on fire with Zack Moss leading the charge? No, it hasn't been good. He had 5 red zone carries last week, 0 touchdowns. Again, he scored against the Patriots, but that's really been the basic of his production 2 weeks in. He has 1 rushing touchdown. Meanwhile, Chase Brown, he touched the ball 4 times. He had 31 yards, averaged 7.8 yards per carry. He had a 28-yard rush, and he had over 6 rushing yards on the last 3 carries he had. So for me, I'm trying to get into the minds of Zach Taylor and this Bengals offense. Okay, how do we get going? How do we get more juice on the field? I mean, it's clear as day to me that you get Chase Brown more involved and you give less opportunities to Zack Moss. So I don't think I'm crazy here. People are dropping Chase Brown. I'm picking him up. I'm stashing him because I think that he's going to get more involved in this offense moving forward as the Bengals look at a favorable schedule the next couple of weeks. So I like Chase Brown a lot. And for that reason, I'm going to be selling Zack Moss, even though he's kind of in that RB1 role. What do we see? Players that underperform, they lose their role. And I think you're going to start to see that happen with Chase Brown getting more involved.
Yeah, Erickson has been kind of predicting this since the summer, sort of how this would play out for the Bengals backfield with Moss early on. I think he was your touchdown call in week 1.
Yep,
You're like,
yeah, because I was like, I knew he was going to start
and then
out
you want to
the
sell
RB1.
him. Yep. Welsh, what do you think about selling Moss, and who's the type of player you would try and get back for a guy like Moss?
Oh, so this is great. I'm into it. I'm not married to Zack Moss. I think Chase Brown, I would love to see him get featured more, a little bit more of a dynamic back. But all right, so we had this exact form of a question come up. So I'm curious where you guys are. This was in the Discord. Somebody was curious about acquiring Isaiah Pacheco with that fibula injury. And I think it's a super dicey situation. They said, what do you think about the idea? They had Zack Moss as their 4th running back. If they could go and move Moss to go get Pacheco that they're clearly trying to stash for the later playoffs. I think there's some worry on that. Erickson, do you think could you do that type of move where you're trading off a Moss? You're essentially getting on something that is not going to produce for you for 6 to 8 weeks. There's really big inherent risk for Pacheco. Is Moss the type of player that you could move off from with the trade being high upside, but also having a 0 return like Pacheco?
Yeah, because I think that, if Zack Moss loses his job, then his value is 0, right?
Yeah.
Like that's something you have to keep in mind with Zack Moss is if he's the second running back in command on the Bengals, then he's going to only be a handcuff and essentially will have no value and he'll be a bench player. So I like the idea of going after a Pacheco-like player. Specifically to me, I would rather not go after Pacheco specifically. I would go after Nick Chubb, honestly. So it's the same type of idea where you're going after a running back that's injured, but Chubb is expected to come back sooner than Pacheco. And his injury happened last year, not this past week. So I feel better about going after Nick Chubb, especially with the Browns getting their tackles back when he comes back. This Browns team needs Nick Chubb. They're not, we've seen 2 weeks of Jerome Ford, Deontay Foreman. None of these guys are Nick Chubb. So I like the idea of going after a bench asset with upside like a Pacheco, but for me personally, I would just choose Chubb in that scenario.
What about a Jonathan Brooks?
Same thing, yeah. I like Brooks.
Yeah,
by
I
more.
love that. I actually
That was
love. I think
number
that's
one,
that's a sneaky one. The only
Great job, Worm.
Yeah, the only caveat with that is you would hope or imagine that the team that had drafted Jonathan Brooks was prepared for this. Like they knew what they were getting into. So like I think that's a tougher sell to taking back to like literally what we opened up the show with, where it's like, hey, when's the time to panic? If you just lost Isaiah Pacheco, and let's say you were 2-0, that's scary. I can't lose my traction. Or 0-2, really any capacity of losing Isaiah Pacheco. That team should probably be more aggressive to find that replacement. And they might look towards a Zack Moss and willing. I don't know long term if a team, especially if a team was 2-0, their likelihood to trade Pacheco is probably lesser than if they were 0-2. But they're going to be a little bit more panicked. I love the Jonathan Brooks one. That's maybe the happiest scenario of what you could do to trade off of a Zach Moss is get Brooks. I think that one you're gonna have to do a little finessing a little bit for them to move off.
I think of like more casual, like home leagues. Somebody doesn't really pay that. He's a rookie. They've never seen him play before. They didn't realize how long he was going to be on the shelf. Like, I think there are leagues where you can kind of take advantage of that manager. And there are probably leagues where you can't, but I bet there are some.
I think too, with the stock of the Panthers, I get that. I know maybe the analysts are, I know I'm pretty high on Andy Dalton taking over this offense.
Same.
I think that he's going to drastically increase the output based on the personnel upgrades they made from compared to last year. I really think Bryce Young was the reason why the team was playing so bad on offense. But in more casual leagues, they may look at the Panthers and be like, I don't want anybody on this team. Why would I want their running back that's coming off a torn ACL? Because people were panicked. People asked me in the Discord, are we just now, like, what's the point of holding Brooks? Like, even if he gets the starting job for this Panthers offense, the offense is horrible. He's not going to do anything. So, yes, I think this would be the time. Again, we're just talking in general, buy lows, Jonathan Brooks. Before you see Andy Dalton take over as the starting quarterback for the Carolina Panthers, this is the time to buy on a rookie like Jonathan Brooks.
Sneaky. You underestimate the sneakiness.
Deontay Johnson, too, along those same lines, I think.
Yeah.
Could have fit that bill. Guys, what's the most valuable thing in the world? A quarterback on a rookie contract? Or how about a healthy fantasy roster going into the playoffs? We would all be very happy with that. Now, the second most valuable thing, that would be time, especially this time of year when I have less available time than ever as I get ready to try and win another championship this season, or certainly hopefully do that in plenty of fantasy leagues. Taking up a lot of that time was worrying about my body odor. This has been especially difficult for me personally, since some of you guys know I don't actually have a sense of smell. I know everybody can be paranoid about smelling, especially by the time you get to midday. For me, it's even more pronounced since I can't even smell myself. That's a lot of time spent worrying, but not anymore. I've switched to Mando whole body deodorant, and it has saved so much time that I've spent perfecting my softball swing. Mando has saved me so much time. Welsh even wishes he could add my bat for the fantasy baseball playoffs. Here's how Mando does it. They don't cover up odor after the fact with heavy fragrances like certain other deodorants. It stops odor at the source by blocking the bacteria on your skin from eating your sweat, which is the actual cause of BO. What does this mean? It means Mando is clinically proven to control odor for up to 72 hours. That is a long time. So give yourself more time and get some Mando whole body deodorant. And they've got a special offer for new customers to get $5 off Mando's best-selling starter pack with code FantasyPros at shopmando.com. I can't tell you guys enough how much of a relief it is to have a deodorant I can really trust without being able to smell myself. And Mando is safe to use anywhere on your body, so there's no part of me I have to worry about. I love that I can trust it was developed by a doctor and that I can trust it in all the cracks and crevices. Remember, new customers get $5 off a starter pack, which comes with both a solid stick deodorant and cream tub deodorant, plus 2 more free products of your choice, plus free shipping. Get 40% off your starter pack with code FantasyPros at shopmando.com, shopmando.com. All right, Welsh, who is your wide receiver to sell?
All right. I told myself I wasn't going to do this with him, but I am going to do this with this player. I am putting on the sell Rashid Shaheed. We are not going into panic mode that Rashid Shaheed cannot be a good player, but he exemplifies what we are trying to sell. So first, let me heap some praise and dig myself into a little bit of a hole. They're running more package plays for him, which is huge for an obvious big playmaker like this. Currently has 38% of the team's yards which is 12th most, and so far has a 22% design play percentage compared to last year's 13%. But 129 of his 169 yards have come on 2 plays. So that would equate to his other 5 catches on the year for just 40 yards. He currently has a 43% air yard share on this team. So the conclusion, what comes back to me for this one is, this is about Olave. I'm not saying Rashid Shaheed can't even be a wide receiver 3 to flex option right now, but you have the highest scoring team. You have vibes up as high as they've ever been about Shaheed. This is all while Olave is not thriving in this offense. Olave currently only has 20% of the team's targets, 20% of the team's yards. Who is Shaheed when Olave returns to this massive form? Still good, better than the past, but I think this is heavily weighted on the big plays and Olave's slip in the offense over the first 2 weeks. So that's kind of my big play on this is like I said, vibes are high. In the Discord room that we did, we had somebody so high on Shaheed that they wanted to fight me that Shaheed should be higher than Jameson Williams. Absolutely not. If I could trade Rashid Shaheed to get Jameson Williams, in a heartbeat. And I just think the trade value is at its highest right now. To consider, if someone sees him as a wide receiver 2 rest of season, I want to move off of him. Think he'll be solid, but his big comeuppance has been at the expense of Olave not being great. And really, when you look at that offense, you've got Alvin Kamara obviously going ballistic last week. We haven't seen Taysom Hill get going. This is built around Chris Olave. I think Olave might be a really great buy low right now because he has not had so much of the team's offense. And you can't play revisionist, like say, well, if he didn't have those, I mean, I gave you the stat what it was, but he's not going to have 70-yard touchdowns every single week. He's not going to have 17 touchdowns on the year. So I'm going to see if the possibility is out there to get a high return moving off of Rashid Shaheed. But I hate doing it because, he is looking better. They're throwing screen passes and stuff, and I might be an idiot.
Shaheed is one of those guys, too, where it's really fun if you have him on your roster. Like, seeing the big play is just like, that's a really fun time on, watching Red Zone, and they cut, and it's the Saints, and you see Shaheed break a long one.
So it was in the first quarter, too, the first touchdown. Yeah. Shaheed again.
Yeah. I almost like the angle you kind of threw in there briefly, Welsh, of buying low on Olave better than selling on Shaheed. But I do think, like anything, it's dependent on what you can sell him for. And I think it's very likely you can sell Shaheed for more than he is currently worth. So I do agree ultimately with it, even if I kind of prefer just buying into the Saints offense more than getting out of it. Erickson, what are you doing with these guys?
I kind of co-sign with what you said about, I felt like that argument was more about buying low on Olave. Because with Shaheed, I think that he's legit in this offense. That's the only my concern. And I think that there's a stigma around Shaheed where, oh no, he's just like boomer bust receiver. That's what he's always been. But again, you said you would easily take Jameson Williams over Shaheed, but I think it's pretty close. I mean, like, what's different? Okay, one of them was a first round pick, one of them wasn't. But when you just look at what they've done, 3 years in the NFL, Shaheed has been way more productive. And again, he's been a deep threat. That's really what his role. But what have both offensives done this year in the offseason is talk about both these players in the first 2 weeks, come out, make them featured pieces of their respective offenses. So the fact that Shaheed, I think, again, has a stigma around him where, oh, he's just this boomer bust. You're never going to know when to start him. Well, you do know when to start because whenever he plays zone defenses, this is what he does. He goes absolutely nuclear, which I talked about on the prop show. We cashed yet again on Rashid Shaheed over, it's like 36.5 receiving yards. So yeah, pay attention to those types of splits, but they're using him differently this year in this Klint Kubiak offense. And when you're looking at the Saints pieces, hey man, the Saints offense looks for real. Like, how can I get access to it? Oh, Kamara, he's way too expensive. Oh, Olave, maybe you can buy low. Shaheed, he is the cheapest part, an integral part of this Saints offense. So I think you're going to find where, put him on the block, see if someone will bite. But I think you're going to end up getting not many great offers because I think a lot of people are thinking, again, from your perspective, Walsh, I don't know if people are going to value him like a Jameson Williams when I think he should be valued pretty close to Williams. So that's just kind of my take on Shaheed.
Erickson, who's your receiver that you're selling?
Davante Adams. So following the process here, going after receivers that have big weeks, spiked weeks of production when they're attached to bad quarterbacks, because we know that the ride attached to Gardner Minshew is probably going to be rocky. So Adams coming off a big game, 12 targets, 32% target share, 9 for 110. He also caught a touchdown. He had 3 red zone targets. He actually had a walk-in touchdown earlier before he ended up scoring the touchdown. So it's a matter of, I just think this production is going to be up and down. And how many times are we going to be in games where the Raiders are kind of in a shootout? Again, the scoreboard against the Ravens, that was a weird game. Both teams really weren't finding the end zone, but you saw the Raiders dropping back a ton. They were struggling to run the football. Well, what are they playing in week 3? They're playing the Panthers. Then they're playing the Browns. Then they're playing the Broncos. Then they're playing the Steelers. Like games that all look gross on paper, where both teams want to play defense. We want to run the football. You have a couple tough matchups. You have Surtain against the Broncos. That's a tough matchup. You have Joey Porter Jr. Again, another tough matchup. Again, not saying Davante Adams can't win these matchups, but it's going to be an up and down road. So again, if you can sell Adams based on this is him every single week, over 100 yards, catching touchdowns, the vibes are good, then yeah, convince that. And I think that Adams has that name brand cachet. Oh, we were worried. Why were we worried about Adams? He was going to be great all year. Again, he had one good game and one bad game, basically so far throughout this 2024 season with Minshew. So I think it's going to be more of the same with him. So I want to capitalize off a high game and try to move Adams.
I obviously watched that game very closely. Welsh, I'm curious what you think about Davante Adams coming off that performance. He looked like eye test. He looked awesome. Like it didn't feel fluky at all. It felt like, oh, vintage Davante Adams is just one of the 3 best receivers in football. I also like that Brock Bowers looks so legit right off the bat that he's going to take some defensive attention away too. It's not that Davante Adams is the only name you have to think about when you're a defense getting ready for this offense. At the same time, like, it is Gardner Minshew. For whatever reason, he's done this now 2 years in a row in Baltimore in September. So just remember that if whatever team he's on next year is facing the Ravens in Baltimore early next season, that he keeps doing this. But I mean, again, just the eye test alone, ignoring trends and stats and everything, he looked really, really awesome in that game. But it was a lot of high level of difficulty plays too, like the toe tap along the sideline. That could easily be another half inch off, and all of a sudden he's not getting those yards, and they don't ultimately make it to the end zone or whatever. So, just something to keep in mind. Welsh, what did you think watching Davante Adams, and what do you make of him as a sell candidate?
I think I'm a little indifferent about this one, maybe kind of how Erickson is with my Rashid Shaheed. Like, I thought Davante Adams looked great. He's the number 1 target on this offense. Brock Bowers will make him better. And this team, they have not established a run game. They want to get Zamir White more involved, which I think there might be a little bit of a buy opportunity on Zamir White, especially if they actually make that happen. But if you can use Davante Adams to buy low on a higher entity, that's where I co-sign on this. I'm not trying to get rid of Adams because I think Davante Adams is going to become a streaky wide receiver and he's going to just, there's his 2 catches and blah, blah, blah. No, I mean, he's the main target of this offense that could be playing from behind in a decent amount of spots. But if Davante Adams can go get you Chris Olave right now coming off of that big game, yeah, thumbs up. I would do that. The Tyreek Hill owner losing their mind? Yeah, I think so. I do think there's validity to there being some ups and downs, but I don't see it like 9 catches this week, 1 catch this week, like he's wide receiver 48 and wide receiver 12. I think you can get at least wide receiver 2 out of Davante Adams on any given week. But like I said, using him as the piece to go buy one of these wide receivers that are being valued low, I absolutely love it from that respect.
I like that Tyreek call a lot. I mean, go make the offer. If they say no, okay. So they're not panicking with Skylar Thompson, but maybe they are, and maybe you can take advantage of that. I really like that.
Oh, Erickson, who would you rather have, Davante Adams or Jaylen Waddle rest of the season?
I would probably take Adams in that one. I mean, the Waddle thing.
So disappointed in you.
I mean, again, Adams isn't going to finish outside the top 20 receivers, right? I'm not calling the end of Davante Adams.
We're already worried about Tyreek with Skylar Thompson.
Right?
I can't invest in the wide receiver 2.
Waddle, I'm going to buy everywhere and just go down with the ship and hope that it works out because, hey,
that's your guy. That's your guy. That's why I'm disappointed. That's your guy.
I mean, he's my guy because he's my guy when I thought Tua was his quarterback.
When Tua was your quarterback. Yeah, 100%.
But
right,
hey,
we'll
see.
Let's play a quick game of buy, sell, or hold. We'll do a running back trio, then a wide receiver trio, then we'll get out of here. For their running backs, Jerome Ford, Javonte Williams, Jaylen Warren. These guys are back to back to back in the consensus rest of season rankings. Jerome Ford, Javonte Williams, Jaylen Warren. Welsh, who are you buying? Who are you selling? Who are you holding?
Okay, so Jerome Ford, Jaylen Warren. I'm pulling up the sheet because I wasn't looking at it. Shame on
Javonte.
me. I am buying Jerome Ford, holding Jaylen Warren, and selling Javonte Williams. I do not like the usage of Foreman this past week against Ford, but Ford is still being used in the pass game. I think I hope that was just a scheme situation. So I guess from like that standpoint of a guy that can be an actual number one, I believe he is that. So that's why I would buy him. Jaylen Warren, I would hold just because I still have some positive outlook that, you know, he's going to get a little bit more involved in the running game. I know it's been kind of Najee, more in the passing game. I'm just out on I'm out on the Broncos situation. They stink. The whole offense is a disaster. Maybe if they have the change of quarterback and they do a scheme change and say, hey, let's just start featuring Javonte Williams more, I'll feel better about it. I do think you could maybe interchange Jaylen and Javonte into the like hold sell, but I'm going to buy Jerome Ford, hold Warren, and sell Javonte.
Erickson, what do you think about that trio? Again, Ford, Williams, and Warren.
No, don't worry. I got the show sheet up, so I'm good.
Man.
I'm going to buy Jaylen Warren because he looked healthy last week. He actually outsnapped Najee Harris, so I expect him to, you know, be the guy that I thought he was going to be when I was drafting him before this hamstring injury. So buying Jaylen Warren. I'm going to sell Jerome Ford. I didn't like what I saw, you know, seeing Deontay Foreman start the game, basically after they didn't use him at all in week one, and they come out week two, oh, we want to use Deontay Foreman more. So that concerns me about Ford's long-term value, that Foreman's already working in week two after he didn't play at all in week one. He just decided, hey, we're going to use him more in week two. And the fact that Nick Chubb is going to come back at some point. So every week, Ford kind of lose a little bit more and more value until, well, now he's just a backup in a potential committee on the Cleveland Browns. So I don't like that. And I'm going to hold Javonte. Again, this was a kind of a hold/sell for me because, again, no one is inspired by the way the Broncos have played offensively the first 2 weeks. But got to keep in perspective, it was Seahawks on the road and the Steelers at home. Again, we saw the Atlanta Falcons play a lot better when they weren't facing the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I still think this Broncos offense, again, Javonte got more involved in the passing game last week, which was better than what he saw in week one. Predicting the Sean Payton usage is impossible because we literally don't know what he's going to do on a given week, whatever he feels like one week. The only thing we know is he's never going to play Marvin Mims. We know that for a fact. Never play Marvin Mims. If you're a guy on the street looking to get some routes, you'll play more routes than Marvin Mims.
He could run a 3.7 40 and they would just be like, no, we don't need to get the ball in his hand. They hate him. Why do they hate him?
Dude, I mean,
they trade him to get him and they hate him.
They hate him.
Dude, when you can get little Jordan Humphrey on the field, you gotta do it.
Yeah.
So
it's wild.
I mean, what happened in week one? Javonte Williams had one touch in the second half, and then in this week two, Jaleel McLaughlin had one touch in the second half. So I don't know where this backfield is going, but I really thought SMA could take over, but then he went on injured reserve. So it really is down to these two guys. So I do kind of want to hold and just kind of see how things play out. Potentially, maybe he gets more confidence in Javonte again. Right now, Bo Nix is the leading rusher for the Denver Broncos. So again, it's bad, but what are you going to sell him for, right? Nobody wants Javonte. He has done nothing through 2 weeks. So I'm going to hold and just kind of see how this Broncos backfield plays out with some more favorable matchups. So that's what I'm doing with the running back trio.
Let's do the wide receiver trio. Jameson Williams, Xavier Worthy, Jaxon, Smith-Njigba. I'll just say right off the bat, I actually like all these guys for different reasons as buys. So I think this is kind of a really interesting one. I'm curious where you guys go. Like I said, all three of them seem like good buys to me. Quick reminder for everybody before we get your answers. You can use the trade analyzer at fantasypros.com/myplaybook or in the My Playbook app to instantly evaluate how any trade will affect your team for this week, the rest of the season, or even in Dynasty. Again, I like all three of these guys, both this season and in Dynasty. So again, Jameson Williams, Xavier Worthy, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, Welsh. Who are you buying? Who are you selling? Who are you holding?
You're a sick person for putting these names on here. This you disgust me for doing this because that we have to sell one of these players. It's gross. All right, I'm all in on Jameson Williams. He's gonna be my buy. I am going to hold Xavier Worthy because we cannot cut Xavier Worthy, and we're going to sell Jaxon Smith-Njigba coming
Welsh
off of a
JSN. That's the headline of the episode.
No. He's playing the market. Who do you get the most for?
16 targets off of Jaxon Smith-Njigba. He's not the number one on this team in DK Metcalf. I'm 100%. That's exactly my process. And are you going to follow me on the exact same path?
I'm co-signing on all. We
You're
don't
buying Jameson Williams.
Yes. He's been good for 2 weeks, baby.
Yes, he's amazing.
The breakout is here. Let's go.
I think if you put all these guys on the trade block, I think you get the most for Jameson Williams, right? Or do you think it'd be Jason?
I think he's the least,
man.
Yeah,
okay.
Dude,
I think people are just really excited. They're like, I think people have been waiting for Jameson Williams for a couple of years now. People like this Lions team, and he's looked so good. I just feel like people want to be in on the Jameson Williams experience. And so,
I wanted to put Jameson Williams over Terry McLaurin on the bye, and I talked myself out of it. Yeah. And that probably would have made Erickson happier, not hating on the McLaurin one. But I love Jameson Williams. I love Lamb. I just can't help it. That's how I feel when I see Jameson Williams. But Xavier Worthy,
Jameson Williams is the Uber Eats player I would give up almost anything.
That's what we should have done. That would have been better, 100%. But Xavier Worthy, though, is this weird one because the production isn't to the level of either of these two guys, but it's sky high potential. And I think he has only slightly lower cost than what Jaxon Smith-Njigba would be, because we talked about that equity of like Terry McLaurin. He's going to break out. It's going to be big. Everyone had that preseason. It's kind of disappointed. Jaxon Smith-Njigba had that week 1, but then it materialized. He did 2 weeks of production in one game, and everyone's like, yes, it is happening. Let's go. It was only 1 week. That's why his cost is at an extreme high, and it may pay off, but I think he's the clear sell of this group if we were really selling any of them.
Yeah, Worthy is the really interesting one to me because I don't think this is going to be the last bad game that he has this season, but I also don't think week 1 is going to be the only multi-touchdown game he has this season. So I think it's just going to be a roller coaster with him, but the highs are going to be so fun. Truthfully, and obviously that's why I picked all 3 of these. I really want all 3 of these guys on my team. But yeah, Erickson, you said officially you're saying the same thing, buying Jameson, holding Worthy and selling JSN.
Yeah, I just think right now you can get the most for JSN, and as much as I'd love to believe the breakout, it's here. Again, the matchups definitely favored him in that matchup against the Patriots. The Patriots were more than happy to let JSN catch a lot of underneath targets. And again, he did make some nice plays downfield, and Geno Smith was cooking. But there's a part of me, man, that thinks, well, why didn't this happen in week 1? Why was Tyler Lockett the main read of week 1? And what happens in week 3? Well, Lockett gets more involved randomly. That's my only fear. Whereas Jameson, look, he's been good for 2 weeks, right? Not just 1 week. So Jameson's been good for 2 weeks. It's here. Sign up. Well, let's go. And then with Worthy, it's his second game as a rookie. Again, he had the same basically opportunities, just didn't score 2 touchdowns. Again, I think we pumped the brakes on him after week 1, realizing, hey guys, he ran as pure as gold in week 1 with 4 touches, and he scored 2 touchdowns as Worm knows, as a Ravens fan. He saw it live. So for me, I think Worthy, the Chiefs slow play rookie receivers all the time. Rashid Rice, what was he doing as a rookie? Nothing in the first half of the year. Worthy's already done more, and he's already playing more than Rice did. And Rice was a top 20 receiver the second half of the year. So you have to hold Xavier Worthy because I think when it's all said and done, he could be the highest scoring guy, especially look at this Chiefs offense. They just lost Pacheco. I know that we're kind of flocking towards Steele and Samaje Perine, Kareem Hunt, all these running backs. But what does this mean? They're just going to throw the ball more. That's really what I expect to happen. Oh, our starting running back got hurt. Oh, we have to drop back and throw him with Mahomes 40 times a game. Oh, well. That means more passing touchdowns. That means more production for all the receivers and Travis Kelce. So, yes, I think this is the perfect time to also buy Worthy in addition to holding him.
All right, we'll get out of there on that fun one. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this week's episode. Good luck in week 3 and beyond. And good luck making those trades this week. For Erickson and for Welsh, I am Ryan Wormeli. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you again next week.
Peace.